pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next item is the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything you'd like to have removed from the consent agenda this time? Okay, moving on to fiscal business. Russell?
The only thing I have for you tonight, sir, is to put a bug in your ear to think about at the next work session. One of the questions I'm going to be asking the board is to see where their comfort level is and what level of reserve that they would like to see in the general fund for planning purposes, so we know approximately where we need to start looking at making cuts in growth if we need to. So think about that. It could be a percentage of the fund. It could be a set dollar figure for it. Just something to think about in the ensuing couple of weeks here before we get to that work session. And that's it for tonight.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Russell? Okay, moving on to special activities. We have Sheriff Larry Sims here. Sheriff, if you would.
Well, thank you all for humoring me since I missed the last one. So, get a creature of habit. I had it on there, but I thought I saw it, little tickler. I always go at 5:30. So I kind of messed it up myself, so I apologize for that.
That's all right. Glad to have you here.
But that's,
I messed the agenda up, so you're okay.
oh, well, it's all good. I appreciate you coming around and
Turn it out, sir.
at least share a few things and see if you have any questions for us. You know, you have the end of the year report, you've seen those before, and it simply contains the data that we collect based upon the services that we provide countywide. So calls for service were pretty near the same countywide as the year before, a little over 66,000, so that didn't change much. I always, at the beginning of it, put a couple things I'd like to mention at the beginning of it. One is, and I think you've heard from Steve Aerosmith, our overdose deaths have, declined from what it was. We're still seeing them. I think a combination of all the efforts from first responders that are using Narcan, a switch that they've made from heroin, in a lot of cases to meth, has changed that some, but there's still people using it and still people dying from it. A couple of things that I wanted to mention. I was going to talk about just to summarize the jail progress that's going on down there, but there are two other areas that affect our office that are going through stages of growing physically their building. Deerfield Township, you may know, is, I think for some time, trying to plan a place to build outside of where they've been leasing the commercial building, and that's supposed to be released sometime this year, RFP to build. That will include our post, which shares that building with them now, our Deputy Sheriff's post. Same with South Lebanon. South Lebanon renovated the old school building down there. If you've not been down there, they did a really nice job. Moved their administrative offices over there, and they're in the early stages of finishing the second floor, which is where our deputy sheriff will ultimately go. That allows them additional room to space. And then I'm sure all of you know this. I know those in our business know that the accolades we get as chiefs are a direct result of the men and women that are out there doing the job. And I can say that happens in my case. I get out quite a bit, talk to people. And I just mentioned a couple of those examples in the end of the year report, one of which was the accident on 71 where the gentleman accidentally got on the wrong side of the highway, wrong direction, hit head on the semi, killed him and one of his two boys that he was traveling with, and two of our deputies got there before anybody else and noticed some signs of life of this 3-year-old boy, and they just kind of picked him up, and one held him while the other one drove and got him to the hospital, and really the reason why that boy's alive today. He spent several weeks in the hospital and did survive. He and his mother actually returned to Warren County here about 2 weeks ago, and got pictures taken with the two deputies and some of the state patrol there. So they're doing well, and it's just it's what we do, it's how we react. Our training kicks in, and it's a credit to them. And then the other thing I'll mention, it doesn't happen a whole lot in our county, and that's the robbery murder that happened over there just outside Lebanon, Oregonia Road. A 17-year-old resident girl who orchestrated this would-be robbery attempt with 5 of her male teenage friends. Masks, guns, baseball bats. The man she lured up, she had a relationship. As they were talking, the young man that ended up dead comes up after him with a baseball bat. Well, that guy was armed, and he defended himself and shot and killed him. Another one of the would-be robbers was armed with a gun. They exchanged some gunfire. The robber got shot twice and ended up in the hospital for weeks, and he's still got doctor's appointments now. He's back in juvenile detention. But 5 of them are facing murder charges. 4 of them are under 18, going to be bound over as adults, and the one 18-year-old's dead. So pretty crazy case. Deputy sheriffs, investigators just did an incredible job when they got there, and within a few days had them all locked up with the exception of one, and he was locked up here just a few weeks ago to finalize all the participants in that. So we're watching that as it progresses through the criminal justice system. So, things have changed, but I mean, that we don't typically see that young a group of people and that many of them plan such craziness here anyway. So, the jail itself, jail sheriff's office, I was just asking this before the meeting started, what's the timeline with that? If you haven't been down there, they are well on their way. Walls are up, housing units are being built. They're still probably summer of next year. They have said they're a couple months actually ahead of schedule, based upon the winter that we've had. And just even in the last week down there, I've seen making tremendous changes. Now that all the footers and things like that are in, they can start building up from there. But it's been at least a little bit of relief to see that progress happening. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So if anybody has any questions of me, us?
Anybody have any questions?
We good to go?
We'll have to read this and then call you.
Okay, call me and make it really late at night.
Okay. No problem.
Early in the morning. You get up in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, and I know you're gonna pull this out, and you're gonna.
We'll study it.
All right.
Larry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all that you do.
Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sheriff.
Careful traveling.
Yes, thanks.
Next item under special activities is a public hearing to consider a text amendment, 2019-2, with resolution 2052-15, a resolution to approve, modify, or deny an amendment that refines standards for home occupation. At this time, I'd like to entertain the motion to recess a regular meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Gearspaw.
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yay.
Mr. Wade.
Yay. Okay, Jeffrey?
Yes, sir. Just a little background. Ultimately, what you have before you is the current draft on the board. I have the initial draft, which was regional planning, the zoning commission's modifications, and then the current draft that we are going to discuss. The zoning commission had a request to update home occupation, and this occurred approximately 9 months ago. And with that, there was some discussion back and forth about where it should go, how it should proceed, and the like. A lot of debate. There was discussion, should some things be permitted uses versus conditional uses, things be inside the home, outside the home, and the like, and all of that. Had a lot of play. Ultimately, they came up with the current draft. The draft, when it went before the zoning commission, pointed out that there were some holes, so to speak. There were some inconsistencies that exist within their regulation, and that from a zoning enforcement standpoint, we had some conflict. They felt that they had done the best that they could with the product and pushed it forward to you. That's why I have in both red and green discussion points and alternative text. Truly, the main difference is this, that underneath the current home occupation definition, you have to reside in the home to be an employee in an activity takes place inside the home, and it's a product of activity that you do in the home. So that's just the thumbnail of it. Part of the discussion that occurred with the zoning commission was, okay, what do we really do with everyone who sells on eBay, you know, and has an internet presence? That's something in 1973, when this code was drafted in this format, was not contemplated. And you guys say, okay, well, you know, there's a lot of things that aren't contemplated, and that's true. So they tried to get there. There were some existing individuals who conduct a business that don't meet the entire home occupation definition. And I tried to get them to actually think about how can we bring in some things that have not been complaints, but we know that they're out there on the periphery, type of discussion. So ultimately, what they came up with was that you can have a home occupation inside the home, or you can have it inside an accessory structure, an or, not an and. The accessory structure, however, has a maximum square footage of 1,000 square feet. So that is the divergence from our current regulation. With that discussion, they also had the idea that as long as you couldn't see the activity in storage, that would be a good way to hide home occupation, which is in direct conflict with our junk and junk regulations, that we want to actually put things inside structures. If you're in a business, you actually have to put things behind a fence, so they're actually more liberal with a home occupation for storage than what a neighborhood business classification would have. So, I'm not sure how you want to proceed, Mr. Wade, if you want to go through this line item by line item, talk about it conceptual. I know that we had brief discussion, I've talked a little bit with the groups also, but I'm not sure how you'd like to proceed.
Well, I have some direct concerns, but maybe I'll just start it off with that, and maybe you can see how that moves from one thing to another.
Sure.
You know, our zoning department has a lot on its plate always, and it looks to me like that if we do an accessory building, that I think it'll be very difficult to control. Home occupation, to me, over all these years, we've had a few issues with that, but not a ton of them, because it is in the home, it's limited. And to put up another building and move it out of the home and still call it a home occupation, I think would develop just a nightmare to keep track of it, and it'll grow. You know, somebody builds 1,000 square foot and then they'll want 1,500, and they want an exception for that, and then they want 100,000. You know, who knows? But you know, I think if they're going to do that, then they need to request to change their zoning to a business. And if we would approve that, it's approved. You know, we haven't done spot zoning over the years. I don't particularly think it's a great idea, but if someone comes in and asks, I think we would consider that. But I don't think certainly we can use some updating in this code with some of the language and things, and you address that, there's no question about that. But I think the biggest thing I can see, or one of the big things, is having an accessory building. I'm not in favor with it, and I personally don't think we should change the code to pick that up. Anyway, I don't know what you guys think about that particular issue, or if you want to move on and talk about other things and get back to that, whatever you think.
Well, no, I think you bring up an interesting point, because I feel like that they tried to take a B2 and fit it into a home occupation, is what this feels like to me. And we do have zoning for that. And as someone that's worked from home for the last 20 years, I can tell you the reason how I do it the way I do it. But I store my samples in my barn. As of now, I used to use my garage. This gets into the weeds a little bit in that regard. 1,000 square feet is a large footprint for someone that would do something like I do. This feels like they're trying to run a business with inventory and things of that nature, beyond what are the zoning classes that's supposed to fit. I read through this pretty extensively just because I was interested in seeing, as Mr. Palmer and I have talked about, it's one thing to have it written down, it's another thing to enforce it. This home occupation is, I mean, I think we'd all be probably staggered to know how many people are in a home occupation situation. I know when I did research on some of the things to do with tax revenue throughout the township and the city, there were a lot more LLCs and companies in the township that I know good and well were home occupations. So, that being said, I think all of staff notes and the law director's comments bring up good points, and I mean, I really feel like that they need to, for lack of a better term, take your direction a little bit more and understand that this is not just, we can't create something that's already there in another form. It's a waste of time, first of all, and it's not what the intention of our zoning code is. That's my take. I mean,
I would throw in too, one of the things I saw that even leaving the home occupation as it is in the home, they wanted to restrict the deliveries to one per day.
I have that big one.
Now, in today's world, you could have FedEx and Amazon, whoever.
Amazon's at my house at least twice a day, so. But no, I mean, to your point, Mr. Wayne, I get my samples and catalogs and things shipped to me, and in a given day, I could have 4 deliveries, just depending on what it is.
And truthfully, I don't know that we've had an issue with those type of deliveries. Now, if we had a home occupation where the semis are coming 4 times a day in a residential area, subdivision, I don't think that's probably a good idea. And if we did, I think we'd probably be hearing about it.
Sure.
So I don't think that's been an issue in my opinion, but limiting those trips, I think, could be an issue. You know, you could have, I was going to go to my industry, you could have an insurance agency in a home, and I'm sure that we have them. People could drive there and visit you, and certainly you could have many company people come that you represent the companies and be their rep, and they could show up there and park and be there for 15 minutes and then leave, but that's what they do. We hope they leave in 15 minutes. So anyway, I'm limiting those trips, deliveries, and I don't think that helps us. I mean, we know we have home occupations that are probably in violation and around the township, so that is an issue that we've been dealing with for many years, and when people, we address those mostly when they've been brought to our attention. And right or wrong, that's the approach we've taken to those. And if somebody has one of those next to them and they bring it to our attention, I think we react to it at that point. It's not the perfect way.
I guess, Michael, I would have a question for you, Mr. Paul. What brought this to where it is? Was it someone that was applying for a variance?
It truly was a property owner who bought land in the township and not yet built a home and wanted to establish their business as quote-unquote a home occupation that did not meet our regs. And part of that discussion, truly, they sold the property, it's kind of another individual subdividing, but they wanted to bring in 1,000 square foot storage facility for their Lamborghini parts. So it was truly beyond what we have ever expected home occupation to be. That started the discussion. That's not allowed underneath the current revision, but that was something of, okay, this is extreme. Is there other things that are extreme that could be viable, so to speak, as we go through this? And ultimately decided that was not a viable option, but that's what was the initiating factors.
So then with the 1,000 square foot building, the 20 by 50, so to speak, to sort of.
Easily, yeah.
Well, they need to go do a business here.
Well, and that's part of what the discussion I had with the zoning commission. You know, ultimately, the home occupation as currently drafted and enforced is that we give the ability for incubation to occur. And at some point you realize, okay, I've impacted my family so much, I have to keep taking stuff off the kitchen table, that it's time for me to move into the bedroom after the kids take, and go to college, so I've got that space grows. I may need employees, I've got too much activity. Now it's time for me to actually get a storefront, to get viable space that's an office space or business and the like. And so it's an evolution. We give you the opportunity to start. I think what this regulation is actually prohibits, my words, that starting point into a business zone. It allows you to continue to grow on site, good or bad, and establish yourself as this is the most appropriate location as opposed to a neighborhood location for business, office, and the like. So, it's a philosophical change for sure, and that's why I wanted to have that discussion with you initially. This is different from where we've been. I have issues with that divergence also. I think we have issues for enforcement. We have ultimately issues for what does our map look like, as Mr. Wade talked about. Is it better for us to do a zone change for these? And historically, we've had home occupations that we've put through as zoning violations, as straight classifications. They've tried to come through and bless them as PUDs, as a way to hybrid that. I can think of two that were not felt to be appropriate through that process, but at least it put as a public input. And that's where I was trying to get some of the discussion with the zoning commission. Warren County rural zoning, has a straight classification for this permitted uses, and then you do a conditional use for other things. So at least have a site plan review that goes along with it that would function comparable to a PUD in the sense of the neighbors are notified, what are your issues, will it blend, what do we have as constraints put on it, and ultimately the zoning commission thought that no, we need to streamline this and have it as a strict classification, permitted by right. They didn't limit uses, as you can see in the document, but they did not put in the option, other than zoning inspector saying, hey, I think this is something beyond what I'm comfortable blessing, and I would push it to the board of zoning appeals. So it still needs work. Ultimately, is there enough of a document that you guys have comfort level in that you'd want to have it proceed with guidance, or is it something that truly is dead on arrival at this point? It needs to go back to the starting table, so to speak, or is there something in between?
Steve, what do you think?
I don't think we need to open up another can of worms, So let's handle issues when they become issues, and instead of creating other things that people can push the boundaries on.
Well, with that being said, it seems like we're probably all three on a very similar path here. But that being said, Jeff, as you did this, and you have a lot more knowledge of the written words here. Are there some areas other than what we've really talked about that really need some updates that we should address? I'm thinking that we should take our thoughts and then rely on your expertise to bring us back some thoughts and say, okay, right, we didn't do this, but probably would be a good idea if we did this.
Yeah, I can, if that's the guidance, I can dig in a little bit more. What I did with the law director's discussion is some of the major blatant issues that were occurring within there. We established some additional options for text. And one of the discussion points that ultimately we relied on in the past, when we've actually prosecuted in Warren County, was how do we determine if a business is here or not? It was the congregation of people and the movement of those vehicles. And now there's a Stark County case that says that we can't rely on that as our sole rationale to determine activity.
Didn't like this.
It's
by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm not in favor of that either. But part of our discussion was, can we use that as an and? And, if we can find all these other items and it's there, can be a way to go. But, this is something that I'm sure, if we play a little bit more with it, something that could come back as a better product. And if you're wanting it tabled to come back and just have this body determine if it's a better product, that's option A. If truly you want it to reestablish at a future time after we've done more research, reinitiate the process and look at a future time, that's an option B.
Well, I think we should, I'd like to go ahead and act on some level of this at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put some work in on this, and you've had plenty of meetings. I don't think we need to ditch the whole thing, but at the same time, if we do table it, let's table it, and can we table it for more than one meeting? I mean, Jeff's got things to do.
Sure.
I don't see. Give us a month or 6 weeks, what you think you two guys could talk about.
So let me make a suggestion to the board, and that is, in the green I don't know if you have the color version in front of you, I do not, so, but, in the alternative text, the first one, I think you've answered that question, which is you would want alternative text 1.
Correct.
Alright.
That's what I was getting ready to suggest. I think we can go through and look at this.
So my suggestion
now.
too is the same as Mr. Gabbard, which is we just go through the alternative text. You may be able to answer questions right now, if that's
Right.
okay with you.
And then the alternative text 2 would be, or the second one would be number
Alternative
1
text
as well.
1, exactly.
Yes.
And then on page 3 of 6, I think that would also, that alternative text would also be consistent with your first two,
Correct. Yep.
right? Okay?
Right.
And then on page 4 of 6, we can see that, sorry.
You're doing fine.
On page 4 of 6, the first alternative text, so that tries to address that case law from Stark County. Here's the point, and I think Jeff has stated it very accurately, which is, if it's just parking, that's by itself, that's probably not gonna be enough, at least in a Stark County case. The 12th district may take a different view.
It hasn't been appealed yet.
Haven't seen it in the 12th district yet, so I don't know the 12th district what governs, but I will say that, you know, they do look at other districts in Ohio and say, okay, well, you know, that's persuasive authority. Not binding, but it's persuasive.
Okay.
So I like the way, we tried to do the alternative text, because what we've done is routinely, so that gives a little bit of interpreting, to make up a word, for Jeff. And Jeff also, and I think this rightly writes in this too, Jeff can either approve a similar use, or he can go to the BZA if he isn't comfortable. So I like both those, I like writing in that discretion. But anyway, back to the alternative text we're talking about, and that is, we've tried to limit that with section 5.15, meaning you can only park, if you're gonna park, you gotta park how everybody else does, which I think is very consistent and goes back to the trustee's point of, if you're gonna have a business there, let's have a business there. That's why we're not gonna have an accessory structure. That's why I liked your point when you began with, you're just trying to put a B2 in a home lock,
Yeah.
a B2 square peg into a home lock round hole.
Yep.
So, I like that. So that's the text that Jeff and I talked about. The other thing too, so I think you would like that alternative text, but I think that's the one you probably, or you may want to vet more. The other one is, at the bottom of that page, is the internet home-based occupations. I think that is consistent with the prior alternative text. And then the last one I talked about on page 5 of 6 is the same thing, parking on or dispatching from the site. And if you don't comply with that section that we referred to earlier, then that's a violation, which is the same kind of, so we're trying to be consistent and pick all those up. But it sounded to me like, if I heard correctly, you guys were pretty comfortable with the alternative text that I just articulated.
Yes, and then the other piece that gave me heartburn was the home delivery per
Yeah.
day.
13.
What number is that?
Number 13.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So is there other numbers besides 13 that, if we're putting forth, come back and have another modification, review of text, alternative text that you guys want to look at?
I think we go with what we talked about with alternatives and your thoughts on some other things. And once you guys get together and try to pull things up. I think, and then we'll look at that.
Okay.
See how that all fits together.
All right.
Once we get a little revised document, I know that's just what you need to know.
No, I'm always trying to make it clear, and if that's seeing it one more time and it spurs additional conversation or options, that's what we're after. We're trying to make a better document.
Which what we like, that's what I'd like to do. See it again and then think about that document and say, okay, well, I didn't catch that before, which is very possible.
All right, so you're wanting to see this at the next evening meeting, which is a month from now, the first meeting in April?
Is that too soon for you?
I think we can probably have something for you at that point.
If that's not too soon,
that's
I
what I'm
think
wondering.
that's good.
All right, so,
Okay, let's, go ahead.
so we just closed the public
Right,
hearing.
see if there's any
See if there's
comments,
any
anybody have
comments.
any comments, questions about what's going on? If you do, you're more welcome to come up to the podium, state your name, and, say what you think. If not, we'll go here with you. Please.
Sandy Goshen,
And your address.
9209
Address too. if you-
9209 Yankee Road, If you're in Warren County, if you're every place else, it's 9209 Yankee Street. The delivering once a day, like you said, you get multiple deliveries just for, I would kind of think, depends upon what size of vehicle's making the delivery. Now, I can see a 53 Flare you probably wouldn't want, but our little truck would be, but like a Sprinter or a
Right,
car,
right.
I would think you'd want more than one a day.
We agree.
Yeah, that one won't get past us. That jumped out at me immediately. I'm like, that's not
I was gonna
realistic
say,
for
yeah,
any
'cause we
home
do
business.
FedEx,
Right.
DHL,
Yeah.
UPS, we can get that all in one day, easy.
Right, yep.
Where they're having to wait for the other person to get out of the driveway so the other one can back in.
Same thing.
agree. We're on the same page there for sure.
Okay, that's all I wanted to bring up.
The
Anybody else have anything?
the interesting thing is, one of the board members works for UPS, so I'm still trying to digest that. Anyway,
Okay, with that, I think we should, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
so moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yay. And now we have reconvened the regular meeting. And with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to table this and allow Jeff to work on the information we've shared with him and his thoughts with him and Brian, and come back in a month.
That'll be April the 13th, sir.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all very much. Anything else under special activities, Matt?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Anything under public comment? Anybody have public comment? Okay. Moving on to new business administration, a request to accept the bid estimate of quality home improvements to make repairs to 6908 North State Route 48, not to exceed $16,720, 10% contingency on the minimum bid.
Yeah, so I sent out a request for bids and an opportunity to do something of an open house for local contractors that I found from the Chamber of Commerce, and reached out to 9 different outfits that we found in the Chamber and by word of mouth for an opportunity to bid on this, and we received 2 written bids among the 9 that I solicited, and the lowest and best of which was for quality home improvement. The written bid was 15.2, but I added it by 10% just to take care of any contingencies that might come up when they get into the repair of it.
Good. Good, well, that's great. Is there a motion to accept this bid?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah. Okay, we have resolution 5216, a resolution approving supplemental appropriations to the 2020 permanent appropriations and dispensing with the second reading.
This is just a formal budget action to supplement and appropriate the line to make this happen.
We're adding $10,000 to that line.
Yes, I've read it. That's good. Anybody have any questions about 5216? Is there a motion to approve 5216?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yay. Okay, anything else under new business administration at this time?
Not this time.
Roads and Parks, a recommendation to accept the retirement resignation of Robert Caudill of our thanks. Sincere respect and profound gratitude for 24 years of dedicated service to Clifton Township and its people, effective May 31st. He's retiring.
Yeah, he toyed with the idea of coming to a meeting and thanking the board and everybody for allowing him to be here, but then he got a little nervous of approaching the podium, so he was adamant that I forwarded his 2-week,
Well, this would,
to you guys.
it fits where it fits. He would be a little nervous about that.
Yeah.
We'll miss him, he's very talented.
It'll be hard to replace him. I think when we stole him from Springboro years ago, they never were able to replace him, so.
Very talented. Well, is there a motion to accept this resignation?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yeah. Anything else under Parks?
No.
Okay. Police Department, Fire District, and Planning and Zoning, all under the consent agenda, unless anything else has popped up? Nothing? Anything?
I just have a police department thing, we had a week-long trial last week, reference to a case involving, crimes against children, sexual nature. An individual that, went to a jury trial last week, he had, abused his, biological child, younger, and then had abused a adopted child here in the township. Glad to report that he received a life sentence, last week at the end of the jury trial. His earliest parole opportunities, 30 years from now, so he's where he needs to be. So, a little troublesome about some of the crimes against children we've had in the last couple of years. Seems to be a bit of an uptick in that, and we're watching that pretty closely, but a successful prosecution last week, and Kevin Barton did a great job on that, so.
Okay, good job. Okay, next item is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Wade?
Yay. And, staff reports.
Circle back and did a little bit more research with regard to, baby boxes, and, reached out to our adjoining, jurisdictions and asked if they would be interested in participating with us, neither of which, responded affirmatively, but, wanted to give the opportunity to Mr. Mearsclaw to, chat about it for a second, if you'd like to.
Absolutely. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I guess I'm wanting your opinions on what we could do, should do. Got a couple of thoughts.
Well, I certainly don't have anything against the project. I think the big thing was housing it in the, not the big thing, one of the things was housing it in the apartment. And as Steve mentioned, that could work, but more if, as a part of a remodel, I think maybe if in that, where you might have been heading, if you could do some remodeling down there, I think that would work out. And I guess, if we're gonna have, if we do it, and as long as we have personnel to monitor it and have all of that stuff in place, I can't argue with it. What everybody else thinks. You never know about those things, but if you help out one situation, that may make waves. You know any more about it, Steve?
Just reached out to some contacts and talked to some friends. Nothing's really changed, no new information. It is expensive, but we could make it work if we put the right things in place. I think it would be, as far as the way the station, is set up right now, we're already busting at the seams. We don't really have a good place to put something like that. We could look into that if we could. In the future, if we were looking to, make that building more applicable to our needs, that would be a relatively easy thing to include in a remodel, so.
Or even a new build somewhere else.
Or a new build somewhere.
Right, yeah, I was thinking timing is a whole lot of everything. Sure. And maybe looking at when that new build would be taking place.
Just included
It included there, or make that time too, when we revamp the 21, then,
I would concur.
which is the best place.
We've got a long-term thought process on it, and
Well, and I'm sure when we get together here soon,
Yeah, something to talk about.
we'll be talking about that specifically.
Yes, we will.
Yes, sir. Hopefully.
No, well, the need is in, so we can talk about it. Okay, well,
And
let's.
to that point, as the discussions go, my wife has offered to come to any kind of community forum that you would have and explain, as she so eloquently does, about the fact that this is something that is also capable at the hospital itself. It's a no questions asked policy that a lot of people don't know, unfortunately. And they're hesitant because it's manned versus more of an anonymous ability, so that's her world.
The more knowledge, the better.
Yeah,
If we
she's-
take
I
the
mean-
effort up, we would certainly do it concurrent with the public education plan, to talk about not just the baby box option, that we would offer about all of the options that are available to citizens of the state of Ohio.
Okay, well, let's, we'll have some discussion about that in our work session. Anything else? Anybody else have anything?
And one real quick thing, we added something to the monthly report. Since last year was our busiest year ever, we put a little area in all of our data points to compare this year's information to last year, so we can kind of see, was last year just an anomaly, or are things trending up? And we're, at the end of February, we're already 85 runs ahead of where we were last year.
Wow.
So, yeah, so things aren't slowing down. So just, if you're looking at the monthly report on the data sheet, if you want to kind of see, okay, last year we were really busy, where are we this year? Kind of give you an idea of that. So first two, yeah, so we're still moving pretty fast.
Were those just raw runs, or did it carve out nursing home?
No, it's just total run volume.
So it says, are you up EMS or fire?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
And that, but what are you getting more of? Net?
We do about 80% EMS versus fire, yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yay.
Mr. Mearsclaw?
Yay.
Mr. Bishop?